Test, test. Test. Test, test. Okay, good morning, everybody. I hope you can hear me. Um, I'm on my own a bit this morning. This is Michael, and Tuya is heading towards our Little Bear Meditation Center, and the music is not what it usually is. We have a few little iPod problems at the moment. So I'm simply going to begin reading from the Destiny of the Nations. Tuya began that some time ago. And of course, I'm not going to be reading in Finnish. It's just one of those things. I don't want to, sort of insult the language. But I will read slowly in English and maybe make some comment as I go along, and then we will think about our responsibility to our own nation and the emergence of its soul. That is I think, the main thing for us to deal with. What is our responsibility in this current day as regards our thought life and as regards the action we take for the emergence of the soul of the nation in which we live, which will contribute to the emergence of the soul of humanity. So actually I put the text here from The Destiny of the Nations. It's the introduction, and I'll be reading part of it and then go back to other more familiar images. Just to say again that this is, well, if I ever use this in the future, it won't apply, but this is the 8th of September. This is the traditional day for the birth of Mary, and the symbolism we're using is, as the Tibetan tells us, that Mary symbolically stands for the earth and especially for the purification of the material nature, the personality of the earth, and its acceptance of the Christ consciousness. So let's read together a little bit here, and I'm putting the text here in the box. I hope I don't get lost on the way, and so you can see it as we go. We're on page 8 at the moment. Humanity is today more sensitive to ideas than ever before. They're coming largely from the Buddhic plane in terms of their origin, and hence the many warring ideologies, because of course humanity takes these ideas as facts and as ideals, and tends to lose something in the process when they idealize the idea. And hence the fact that, in defense of their plans, even the most recalcitrant of the nations has to discover some idealistic excuse to put before other nations when occupied with any infringement of recognized law. Well, certainly Germany did this, and Italy did this, and Japan also did this. Germany did it most potently, the so-called knife in the back, and how the betrayal of the German people, of the great German people, and so forth. So this is a fact of general significance to the hierarchy, for it indicates a point reached, that it's not just naked aggression, right? The major ideas in the world today fall into 5 categories, which it would be well for you to bear in mind. So here we will learn something. Number 1, the ancient and inherited ideas which have controlled the racial life for centuries. Okay, and the lower nature of man has given into aggression for the sake of possession, and the authority of a man or a group or a church which represents the state. So it's sheer imposition and acquisition. For purposes of policy, such powers may work behind the scenes, but their tenets and motives are easily recognizable: selfish ambition and a violently imposed authority. So the astral body and the will-inspired lower mind are paramount here. Now, the next group, number 2, those ideas which are relatively new, such as Nazism, fascism, and communism, though they are not really new, as new as people are apt to think. They are alike on one important point, that is, the state or community of human beings counts as of importance, whilst the individual does not. So this is the obliteration of the individual and the magnification of the state. He can be sacrificed, that is, the individual, at any time for the good of the state or for the so-called general good. Well, there's maybe some truth in that. The problem is, of course, if you're going to have a real group, the individuality of the group members has to be developed and has to be respected. Now, the next. Number 3. The idea, neither old nor particularly new, of democracy in which supposedly, but as yet never factually, the people govern and the government represents the will of the people. In a straight democracy, maybe more or less in ancient Greece, with a smaller number of people, we had this kind of functioning. Today, maybe there is no true democracy. We tend to have republics, where the people are represented by others who vote for them according to the wishes of the people, at least most often, if the individuals who represent want to be re-elected. Okay, number 4. The idea of a world state divided into various great sections. This is the dream of the inclusively minded few. Now remember, this is being written in the 40s. I don't know, sometimes when, we have this phenomenon going on where the news is offered and people make comment about the various stories, and you can see from the level of commentary that sometimes it's pretty low, and you wonder whether we've made much progress at all. Of course, people do get to vent their spleen, so to say, in these commentaries, and maybe it's not the most thoughtful people who come into the commentary arena. Okay, the idea of a world state divided into various great sections. This is the dream of the thoughtful few, inclusively minded few, for which many regard humanity as yet unready. Towards this the entire world is headed, in spite of its many ideologies, which, tend to, along the six-ray line, fight with each other. And as he says here, each fighting with each other for supremacy and oblivious of the important fact that all these ideologies may be temporarily adapted to the groups or nations who adopt them, and then are suitable for those groups, but not for all of humanity, correct? They are none of them suitable for general use, and I say this equally of democracy as of any other ideology. They suit well, in all probability, the nations who accept them, and mold their national life on their premises. They are only transitory substitutes. In this transition between the Piscean and Aquarian ages, and cannot permanently last. Nothing, as yet, is permanent. When permanency is reached, evolution will cease and God's plan will be consummated, and then the greatest revelation of all will come at the close of this world period. Maybe it's a round, or maybe it's all the rounds, when the human mind, intuition, and soul consciousness is such that understanding will be possible. So, if humanity is not ready for number 4, and DK seems to say that these ideals are temporary expedients and suited to the nation which has adapted them and generated them, then what is humanity's attitude towards number 5? Okay, let's look at that. Number 5. The idea of a spiritual hierarchy, a great meritocracy really, which will govern the people throughout the world and will embody in itself the best elements of the monarchical, out of Shambhala, the democratic, more out of hierarchy, the totalitarian, well, usually he has rather negative things to say about how the totalitarian ideas are applied, but they do emphasize the importance of the larger whole over the individual, which is ultimately, I suppose, true, and the communistic regime. So, emphasizing the best of monarchical, democratic, totalitarian, and communistic regimes. Communism, he says, being generated by humanity itself. Most of these groups of ideologies have latent in them much beauty, strength, and wisdom. Masons will recognize these three: beauty, strength, and wisdom, and also a profound and valuable contribution to make to the whole. Trouble is, in a way, we have these warring parties, none of which have at this time, the entirety of the picture. Each will eventually see its contribution embodied under the control of the hierarchy of the Lords of Compassion. Master Jesus, Master Serapis Bey, Lords of Compassion, and the Masters of the Wisdom, many of the masters with whom we deal. The restoration of the ancient Atlantean control by the spiritual forces is still in the future, but the Aquarian Age will see the restitution of this inner and spiritual guidance, at least on a higher turn of the spiral. Excuse me, just a little drink of water there. All this must inevitably be brought about by the work of those who function on one or other of the 5 controlling rays to which I have referred above. The 6th ray is going out of incarnation in the racial ray cycle. The 1st ray is not thoroughly in. The 4th ray is coming in. There's a lot of mutation and flux in which rays, concerning which rays we have available to us. Nothing can stop or truly impede their united effect. The Ray Lords have certainly learned to work together, and this is a point I would have you remember. Modern man is apt to condemn the ideology which is not familiar to him and for which he has no use. We are quite narrow in that way and not especially absorbent, not especially inclusive. He repudiates those ideas which do not lie at the back of his national and personal life or tradition, and which would not suit him as an individual nor meet the need of the nation to which he belongs. So modern man is still very nationalistic, we might say, and is not thinking in terms of the globe and of the one humanity. The recognition of these facts would lead to 2 results if correctly applied. That all ideas are partial and more inclusive possibilities are on the horizon. First, the individual who accepts and is devoted to a particular ideology would cease fighting other ideologies, for he would remember that the accident of birth and of background is largely responsible for making him as an individual what he is and determining his beliefs. This is the Saturnian conditioning. Now, I suppose there comes a point in which the nation in which an individual will be born is more attentively chosen by the solar angel and the presence of the higher consciousness of the individual to be born, but he still calls it the accident of birth and its subsequent conditioning. And secondly, it would bring to an end the attempt to impose a personally or nationally accepted ideology, political or religious, and we certainly notice imposition in both of these cases on other nations and persons for whom these ideologies may be very ill-suited given their particular development. He does talk about, we in the Western nations think about the beauty of democracy, and giving every person their voice and their will and all that kind of thing, if it could really happen. But he talks about, for instance, the United States trying to impose that view of democracy on everybody. And of course, there was the question about whether communism would be imposed on everybody. So these are sins of a totalitarian attitude. Anyway, if we can stop fighting the other ideologies and stop attempting to impose them on others, then these would be basic steps towards eventual peace and understanding. And hence I emphasize them today, he says. Okay, now I think that will be enough for the moment. You know, keeping these things in mind. I'm trying to, I'm trying to just, yeah. Okay, so when Tuya gets back or is able to get into this, this is the end of the Destiny of the Nations reading, and it's on the, the 8th of September and 2018. Oh, I think it's a wonderful book. Now, you know, people will say, well, look, politics has changed, international relations have changed, and they have. But he has been very forward-looking in his analysis of the gifts and the liabilities of the nations. And because of that, it has real application today. Now, many more nations have emerged, and they're not even yet in the stage when the mind is emerging very fully, and yet alone the soul. All of that is a process that operates for nations the way it does for people. You know, if I'm not yet of mature years as a human being, I have to go through a period where I'm cultivating my mind and then cultivating a larger picture of the whole, and thus it is today. But certain nations have remained. They've grown stronger. They have a destiny according to their soul ray, according to the sign of the zodiac connected with them, and we'll be dealing with all that very, very shortly as we go along. Now, as I expect, Tuya will be mostly presenting this when she can. Right now she's on a train, and the finished text will be interpolated. So my apologies to people who are speaking only Finnish, but I think, you know, there's quite a few that are speaking English too. All right, now, if I can, right, hopefully this will take us into where we need to be. As I say, I don't have my usual music with me. You may hear the Om in the background slightly. Okay. Well, I think I only really want to ask one meditative question now. And that question, you know, as done in a way in the presence of Master DK with his proven expansive mentality. You know, think for a moment. Let's be into a meditative mode. Think for a moment about your soul qualities. You are an aspirant or a disciple. I guess we're all aspirants, aren't we? Aspirant to some higher degree of realization and capability. And technically we're all striving to become disciples and accepted disciples on the periphery of a master's ashram. So think about your soul qualities. What do you really have to offer? What's being developed in terms of your soul qualities to be expressed through your personality. We'll give a little silent time for that. Now, according, to your ray, and according to your astrological chart, and maybe, there may be, just as there is for the nations, an inner astrological sign with which your individuality, your soul nature, is associated. This is certainly possibility, and I think it's hinted at in one of the introductions to one of the Dinah books by Foster Bailey. It would make sense. You were individualized at a certain time, long, long ago, and there were astrological factors operative, and they may have made their impress upon your soul nature, which is carried from life to life. But for the time being, we may not know, and there may be kind of an intuition of what that may be, but it has to remain unconfirmed for the moment. Nevertheless, we all have a rising sign, just the way nations do, and that rising sign has a lot to do with our soul contribution. So you have gifts. We all have gifts. We've had hundreds and more, probably, almost certainly, thousands of lives. And we built this Temple of Solomon on the higher mental plane, the egoic lotus, the causal body, and are supervised by a great kind of deity who has been specially trained to take a human being under supervision and help with the evolution of that human being. So with all your gifts, put them to the side for just a moment and think really clearly about the nation in which you live. Now, of course, we're all members of humanity, We're either in the Occident or the Orient, and those are big categories. The Occident has the Orient has a Ray 4 soul, harmony through conflict, and a Ray 3 personality, always. It's the personality ray that is a useful instrument but can cause trouble, separativeness. And the Occident has a Ray 2 soul and a Ray 4 personality. So we can see that it is so that occultism, spiritual occultism, is moving to the West. Those are big categories. And when it comes to humanity as a whole, it's got a Ray 4 soul, a warring kingdom of nature, intent on peace eventually. An array 5, monastic personality. And eventually it too will have the ray 2, love, wisdom, soul, and then probably the personality ray will be the 4th ray, but not yet. Not yet. So humanity is right now a 4 and a 5, trying to head towards a 2. Now those are the big categories. But your nation, what about your nation? To decentralize ourselves and stop ourselves from thinking merely in terms of our own little microcosmic system, it's good to think in terms of our nation and its problems and its gifts. So let's give a little silent time to that. I'll go forward here to the 5 planetary centers, because we're under the supervision of these as well. Our nation is, that is. So we focus on the gifts of our particular nation. Let's take a little bit of time for that. And probably, if you investigate your national life, you'll find many wonderful things, and also, some problems, probably linked with the personality ray and personality sign of your nation. You have to know a little bit of rayology and astrology to do this, perhaps. But the personality, although it's meant to be the soul-infused instrument of the soul qualities, does tend to lead toward a separative and nationalistic attitude, at least so far. Okay, but now it's about your responsibility, and each one of us really does, have that. We can say, okay, our nation is too big a thing. I'm not in one of the governing bodies. I'm not in Congress, Senate, Parliament, whatever it may be called. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a legislator. I'm not a judge. I'm not a president. What can I do? But in occultism, we have the power of thought. And these inner gifts do exist. So, let's look at our responsibility, your responsibility, mine. What can I do to bring forward the soul qualities of my nation, which will help bring forward the soul qualities of the hemisphere or the planetary center under which I live, and then the hemisphere, and then finally the soul qualities of all humanity. And we may reach that harmony phase prepared by so much painful conflict over the ages. So what can I offer? And according to the nature of the ashram toward which we are tending, or in which we may know ourselves to be working, so will be our gift, because that ashram is largely dependent on the soul ray, unless, of course, one is on loan, so to speak. But still, even if on loan, one has to carry forward the intention of the ashram to which one is donated. And how is it, your gifts? What is the more specific way in which your gifts, your spiritual gifts, are helping the soul of your nation emerge? It's so true that humanity has wandered into a cul-de-sac. It doesn't, on its own, know how to go forward. It's a dead end in many ways, and many of the disciplines of its thought are dead-ended unless a more spiritual way is found. So we really do have an internal responsibility to think, at least every week, maybe more often, about what's trying to happen in that concentration of human beings, devas, other life forms, which we call our nation, probably gathered around some magnetic, talismanic source, and take the responsibility to help those qualities really emerge. So, think in those terms, carry it forward. We're in Virgo now. It's a question of the purification of our purpose as individuals and as a nation. Pretty soon we'll be in Libra, and then it's all about right international relations. This is the key. Now, before we conclude our little reflection here, I'm going to, there's several very important ones, and here is a beautiful statue of someone's ideal of the Christ, and we think of him, and that we're all working for him in a way, and his hierarchy is working for him, as he is a representative of the Lord of the world, the Father in heaven, who is a representative or extension of the planetary logos, and on toward the solar God of love. Probably that's as far as we need to take it for the moment. And the Christ is real. He's on this planet. He's in this planet. He is the world teacher. He's not an abstraction. He's a great reality. And we try to realize that. And then we say, we have gathered in your name, Lord Maitreya, be with us. And he will certainly be with us if we are with him. We know the story, wherever two or more are gathered in his name, there he can be found. Because he is, or the Christ consciousness is, the principle of relationship, of right relationship. So we never forget whom we serve. And the problems will gradually give way through to intelligence, love, and a determined will. And our planet will become increasingly a sacred planet. Master Decay tells us that inwardly it already is, so that's different from Mars and different from Venus. Venus is thoroughly a sacred planet, Mars is not a sacred planet, and our Earth is in transition. So let us together, we'll do the English part, and the Finnish text is there, of the Great Invocation. The most powerful instrument we have in preparing humanity's heart and mind for the externalizing hierarchy and the reappearing Christ. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. from the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Okay, friends, we have to adapt because Tui and I are not always in the same place in our little studio, so to speak, um, all the time. Sometimes in America for conferences, and sometimes in the Little Bear Meditation Center, sometimes here in the Temple of Silence, where, of course, it is easier. So may all of us somehow live according to this mantra of the new group of world servers. May we be true servers of the race and meet the need, really detect the need of people, of communities, of nations, and of humanity as a whole. May the power of the one life pour through the group of all true servers. May the love of the one soul characterize the lives of all who seek to aid the great ones. May we fulfill our part in the one work through self-forgetfulness, harmlessness, and right speech. The sense of responsibility is the first indication that the soul is really taking over. That's a Saturnian thing, and let us all be deeply imbued by the sense of responsibility to humanity, to the hierarchy, most of all to the divine plan. And our projects, as you know, allow participation on various levels, and you may also be involved with other groups. It's all one work, and we try to bring understanding into the minds of human beings so they can know what's really going on our planet. The triangles work, indispensable. The Blue Rose Sisterhood creating a chalice for the Christ consciousness. The Moria Federation educating us deeply in the work of Master D.K., Moria, and Blavatsky, and many others, really. The University of the Seven Rays, now, over 30 years old, and working to bring the light. We seek for the soul of humanity to emerge. We study with the Tibetan. He's a great teacher, the sanctioned messenger of the masters at this time. Here's a beautiful statue of the conception of Maitreya Buddha, well, in a way, one of the earlier incarnations of the Christ, but also he's known as Maitreya Buddha even now. The Maitreya translates, I've been told, as loving kindness. So thank you, everybody. A little different kind of program. I'll do my best while Tuya is away, and maybe somehow music will come to me on an iPod through the mails, and I'll be able to accompany our meditation with the various pieces we've come to use. So thank you, and many blessings to you. Lots of love from Tuya and myself. And today at 6:30 GMT, for those who are members of the Blue Rose Sisterhood, either Blue Rose Sisters or Shiva Brothers, or if you may be interested, we're doing the symbolic celebration of the birth of Mary. It's not just an individual. It's true, she is in a way an ideal, acquiescent disciple who accepted the great burden of the Christ consciousness and accepted it fully. But there's more to it, because the earth itself, in its material nature, inherited from the past, has to accept the second ray, Christ consciousness, its soul nature. That's the higher meaning, and we try to create that chalice for the Christ consciousness. And I think I can say that when we start to get into the Christ consciousness, we wonder what in the world we thought it was, because it's so amazingly different. So we'll see you a little later, 6:30 p.m. GMT, if you want to attend using the usual YouTube link. Okay, many blessings, everybody, and let's stay aligned with the great energies. Bye-bye for now.